Hello, everybody. My name is Gregory Siegel, and welcome to episode 3 of Terminal X, The Haunting of Highway 9. This episode is going to be a little different. Obviously, it's been quite a few months since I've done an episode of Terminal X, and this is the first time in the series that I've shown my face so you can see what I have to say unfiltered, unscripted. And the reason why I'm doing that for this episode is because today I'm going to be sharing my story. What I'm going to tell you today is something that has haunted me for nearly my entire life. So I want to get a couple things out of the way first. For some of you, this story may be hard to believe. And for others, it might be easy. At the end of the day, what I'm sharing with you is my experience. So let's get started. I grew up on the border between Wewoka and Seminole, Oklahoma. This is an area that is particularly rural. There's not really a lot there. My grandparents had a lot of land, but they only inhabited a small portion of it. You see, they had their house and the surrounding area, but part of the land they owned was just completely engulfed in like tall grass. When you are a young child, you could just imagine it just towers over you. And I remember that we decided to move in on their land with a mobile home. And so my grandfather cut all that grass down and we built the foundation for our trailer, our mobile home, to be put on the land. That's when we moved in. I lived there between the ages of 7 and 12. And during those 5 years, it started very small. My brother and I would be playing on the swing set, and I would hear my mom's voice yelling for us. You know, it'd be like, Jordan, Josh. By the way, my first name is Jordan, so there's no confusion. I would hear her voice call our names. And so we would run back home to the house, and I'd ask my mom, I'd be like, what did you need? And she'd be like, what are you talking about? I didn't call you. And it was so strange because my brother and I both heard it. And it was her voice. So we really didn't know if we were just hearing things, but if so, like, both of us at the same time hearing it? It happened quite often. We would be playing somewhere near the treehouse or even on the basketball court on the other side of the land. We would hear, Jordan, Josh! And we would run back up to the house, and it was the same thing every time. I didn't call you. You're hearing things. At this point, me and my brother stopped talking about it. We just ignored it, which is probably the best thing we could have done, but unfortunately, it didn't really work. So every night before I would go to bed, I had this fixation about having my parents come in and pray for us. It always took me a while to fall asleep, so about an hour or so later, as I was starting to fall asleep, my mom would come in, she would whisper in my ear, and she would say, "Goodnight, Jordan." And it was always like an hour after I went to bed. So the next development in the story really comes when my mom decided to go to Colorado to visit her brother. So I knew that the routine was going to change, and I had already prepared myself for it. My dad had come in and said goodnight and to pray for us. And as I was starting to fall asleep, I heard that whisper in my ear from my mom, "Good night, Jordan." She was out of state. It is not possible. I had this window right behind me where I would sleep, and I just remember feeling this overwhelming sense that something was there. So I run. I book it to my parents' room, and I explained to my father, I said, Dad, you know how, like, in the middle of the night when Mom comes in and she whispers goodnight into my ear, And he said to me, and I'll never forget this, he said to me, "Your mom never comes back into the room." And then I would just like think back and remember my mom calling my name when we were playing outside at the sandbox or over at the basketball court. I'm hearing my mom call my voice, but she's not doing it. What is this? I just heard a noise. I'm in a dark room with weird lighting, so this is... All right, let's get back to this. So that continued, hearing the voices. I didn't hear them at night as much, but I still heard them a lot during the day. But even though I stopped hearing the voices at night, something else started at night to replace that. And that's when I started seeing things. This wasn't some peripheral vision, oh, I see something running at the corner of my eye. No, this was right there. I didn't really have a nightlight. That was my brother's thing. I would leave the bathroom light on and the door cracked so that there was some kind of light coming into the hallway. So I would always just kind of lay my head down and then look out in the hallway. This shadowy figure walks through the hallway. I'm staring straight at it, terrified. And it would sit there in the hallway and it would turn its face and look at me with these bright red eyes, almost like surprised that I could even see it. And then it would just disappear, almost like in a smoke. Just, it like faded away from existence. I didn't get a lot of sleep. There were also some weird random events that weren't consistent, but they were definitely strange. We had this, like one of them in particular was really weird. We had this Asian lady beetle infestation. None of the other houses in our area had this problem, and neither did my grandmother's house, who literally was a 3-minute walk. It was just our house. We would have this infestation for weeks on end, and it was the strangest thing.
Yeah, I remember the Asian lady beetle infestation. They would get in the light fixtures in the cars. They'd be all over the cars. A lot of dark stuff in that place. I don't know if that was something that was ancestral with us or if it was just in the land or whatever. There's a lot of, every place has its energy. Some of it's good, some of it's bad.
Weird things started happening. My father started changing his behavior. Like there was something in this house. And with me being as spiritually sensitive as I am, I took the brunt of most of it. By the time I was 10 years old, I considered maybe this is just all in my head. Maybe I'm imagining this. Maybe I have some kind of mental health situation going on. I started going to the library and reading things about schizophrenia and reading things about all other kinds of, just trying to figure out, is this just me? Until the night I realized it wasn't just me. It was a regular night. Started falling asleep, going to bed. I would turn to the other side so that way I wouldn't have to see the hallway. It usually helped as long as I didn't look at the light. And so I fell asleep, Josh fell asleep, and then all of a sudden I hear my dad burst into the room and he's like, "You guys need to go to bed. It is way past your bedtime." And me and Josh are just like waking up, we're like, "What are you talking about? We've been asleep. You came in here and woke us up." And he said, "Don't lie to me. I saw your shadows running around in the hallways." My parents, or at least my father, saw the shadows. It wasn't just me. And I realize now I'm not the only one seeing this. When I was 12 years old, we left. I was ready to get out. I wasn't ready to leave my grandparents. They were really sad when we were leaving. I remember my grandmother took it really hard. But I needed to get out of there. My dad got stationed to Washington, Fort Lewis. When we left Oklahoma, that was a huge sigh of relief. I stopped experiencing these things altogether when we left. My senior year of high school, I decided to move back to Oklahoma, but a different area. I moved to a suburb of the city with another aunt and uncle of mine on my dad's side. But I would go back to my grandparents' land for certain holidays like Thanksgiving and such. I actually ended up staying the long weekend for Thanksgiving there. And it was my first time going back there to sleep in years. But I knew that I felt like I was older now, and I was like, maybe it was my imagination. I was still convincing myself, even though everyone else in my life was experiencing these things too. I was still trying to convince myself that this wasn't real. And I was older now at this point. I was 18 years old. I was like, I'm officially an adult now. I need to go back here and stay and see if things are any different. That weekend was wild. It was a roller coaster ride. Weird event after weird event. Now, I didn't see the shadowy figures this time, but what I did experience was completely different. I remember my grandparents would take the golf cart back and forth, and in the middle of the night, I tried walking over to the trailer house, but by the time I got to the treehouse area, instant fear. So that was coming right back. I was like, this feeling of dread is so strong that I can't walk any further physically. I bolt it and I run back. I'm like, why do I still have the strong visceral reaction to this treehouse? It just didn't make any sense. So I took the golf cart and I was like, I'm just gonna drive really fast over there because that's where I was sleeping. That's where all my stuff was. But as I got into the golf cart and I started driving, there was this long stretch of land right here. If you can see it right here, there's this whole empty area, this whole space, where there's just nothing. And it was right around here where I saw this. It was so strange. There was there was a deer and a coyote just sitting there chilling, almost like they're having a conversation. When they realize that they've been caught, they look at me slowly, look back at each other, and then walk off into the woods together. Predator and prey just sitting there having a conversation. Strangest thing. I can't explain it. I don't know how to explain it, but it just seemed human-like. The way that they were reacting to each other's movements felt human. It didn't seem animalistic in any way. It was very, very strange. And when I ended up getting back over to the trailer, I asked my cousin, I said, and I told him a little bit about what I had experienced when I was younger. He was in high school now, and I asked him, I was like, have you been experiencing anything weird since you've been here, since you've been living here? He's like, what do you mean? What do you mean weird? I was like, have you been seeing or hearing things? And he said, oh, so I'm not crazy. And that's when I knew. And he explained everything that he had been experiencing, and it matched up almost completely. So whenever I left to go back to the city, I messaged, my brother on Facebook, and I said, hey, I need you to do some digging. He ends up coming back because we were both trying to look stuff up, but he found it first. And when we started reading it, everything just started adding up. We found this thing, and if you've seen my other episodes of Terminal X, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. the Skinwalker situation. Remember that from episode 2? They can replicate the sounds of your loved ones to lure you into the forest. We were reading this and we were like, everything just started adding up. And then how they can shapeshift into different animals. And that made me start thinking about the deer and the coyote and how they were like conversing, and everything was just like, it made sense. However, we could never really find anything about the land itself before my grandparents bought it. And that's something that I've been kind of trying off and on to figure out my whole life, even up until this point. My grandfather passed away a few years ago, and when that happened, the land was just becoming too hard for my grandmother to keep up with. And literally this year, they put it all on the market. And the last time I was able to see it was when I took my husband to see the infamous land a couple years ago. I mean, yeah, there's theories about skinwalkers and, Seminole Nation folklore, but there's really no way to know exactly what went on this land to make it so dark. What happened? What caused it? Something really bad had to have happened there for it to be that intense for that long. And the longer we were there, the worse it got. It fed. And I'm a very spiritually sensitive person, so I have a pretty big understanding of different entities and things, and something that I've learned about like the dark, or what some people call demonic energy, is that it's a very slow, very progressive type of haunting. And I don't think this is a human spirit, and I don't know what it is that's there. But I fear for whoever is going to buy that land. Because whoever lives there next is in for a roller coaster ride of possibly demonic activity. And I honestly, that is what I think it is. I think that it is a hot spot for demonic activity. And that activity did carry on into our future. Even though we left and we stopped seeing things, it still affected us. My brother decided that he didn't want to be alive anymore in 2016. And when he was alive, and the events leading up to his death, I remember my father saying that he would have these visions of this demonic force pulling his strings like a puppeteer. And there was a time in his life where he had completely lost his entire identity, and he wasn't himself. And once it took my brother, it started going after my father. And then it started going after my mother. And whatever was there followed us in some capacity. The only closure I have is that I was able to get this entity cleansed from my family line. And we haven't had any issues since then. Because that stuff follows you, especially if it's demonic. It can follow you, and it definitely did. But thankfully I was able to get rid of it. But I won't be able to get rid of those memories, and I won't be able to get rid of the damage that this entity caused in our family. I lost my brother. I almost lost my father. And my mother, my relationship with her was almost completely destroyed. But no, I don't have closure. I don't know where this thing comes from. I don't know what caused this thing to feed on this particular area. How did it originate on this land? What put it there? Did somebody summon this thing? Is it just random? This kind of demonic activity isn't just random. Something had to happen. Something had to put it there. And I'm never going to know exactly what that was. I'd love to figure it out, though. And maybe I will. And maybe there will be a part 2 to this, where I'm able to dig a little deeper into my past. But until then, this has been Terminal X, Episode 3, The Haunting of Highway 9. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.